Welcome to The Common Bridge, where policy and current events are discussed in a fiercely nonpartisan manner. The host, Richard Helppie, is a philanthropist, entrepreneur, and columnist who has over 1 million listeners around the world. His podcast and YouTube show draws guests and audiences across the political spectrum.
So, Rich, I've got you away from your daily routine because I've got the mailbag questions. Our listeners and our watchers have a lot to ask you about, and so let's see what we can do.
All right. Well, I hope everyone understands I'm not the expert, but the people the guests that have been on our show, no, they're the ones that really know what's what.
All right,
but
fair enough. But I think this will be fun. I got to start out with this one though, because these two things kind of wrap together. And I apologize if I'm going newsworthy at this time, but Steve Bannon just got indicted, and he had his own TV show in front of his house when he got sent up to be arrested, I guess, about January 6th. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, January 6th has to be absolutely thoroughly vetted. You don't want people running around inside the Capitol, threatening the vice president's life, trying to interfere with the counting of the electoral votes. I'm trying to think of a reason you'd want to do that, and anything I can think of didn't happen this time. And there's no justification. It doesn't matter what happened over the summer elsewhere. One of the hallmarks of a constitutional republic is the peaceful transfer of power, and that as disappointing as it is to lose an election, you lose, you congratulate the victor, and you say, I'll pledge to support you for the good of in this case, the whole country. And to me, the January 6th basically just is yet one more chapter in this horrible novel or book that we're living. It's a partisan divide. You could see the country literally cleave on people that said, oh, yeah, they should have been in there, and other people are just horrified by it. And there's such a distrust of the other side. And by the way, both of the two major parties have earned the distrust. But to have a sitting president of the United States for months go on about the only way I can lose is if it's an unfair election and so forth, and then egg people on, and then go, oh, what? I didn't know what was happening. It's just not a believable story. And if Steve Bannon's a witness that can shed light on what led up to it and how we can avoid this and punish those that are responsible according to the law, we need to do that.
Do you think that Steve Bannon is
enjoying
this?
The only reason this is even controversial, in my humble estimation, is that neither of the political parties has much credibility left outside of their most ardent supporters. And certainly there's a long litany of absolute horrible reporting that continues to spew out that just adds gasoline to the fire. People don't know who to trust. So anyway, this is a really sad chapter, and one you'd think we could agree on in some form or fashion.
All right. Carrie from Saratoga Springs writes asking, what are your thoughts about the Virginia governor's race? And does that portend anything coming in the next year?
Well, look, I think it portends something the next, 4 years for people that live in Virginia. I don't know that it means a lot for the rest of the country. People always try to extrapolate it and say it means something else. I would imagine if you asked Virginians, there's a lot of reasons people went to the polls and a lot of reasons people voted for Mr. McAuliffe. A lot of people have different reasons for voting for Mr. Youngkin. And again, I just wish we were in a place where people would congratulate the winner and let's move on. Let's try to, run a good state.
All right. And how do you think Youngkin makes a good or a viable Republican candidate in 24?
Oh, that's just way too early to talk about that. But certainly, we couldn't do any worse than the last two times around. From if you're a Republican, um, you know,
That's interesting though, because you've got two different readers that asked that they wanted to know what your thoughts were if whoever, if anybody but Trump can go into 2024 without his blessings and win, or do they think that you can't make it out of the primaries? You think you probably can win the general, but how do they get out of the primaries without his blessing?
look, the only sensible thing to do is to cut yourself loose from Donald Trump. Period. Okay, look, this is not going to be a electoral strategy answer. It's going to be a common sense answer that kind of people are just afraid to say. The only thing to do is cut Donald Trump loose. If you looked at the guy's behavior, he's your friend until he gets his feelings hurt, and then he turns and he guns at people. You know, he's done it over and over again. And if I was a candidate, I'd say, you know, I don't need your endorsement. If you want to give it to me, fine. But I'm not going to be beholden to a loose cannon like Donald Trump. And I think it really plays to, you know, what I call stupid political tricks on the part of the Republicans that are tiptoeing around the guy for the sole reason that, well, he has a following. And not understanding the reason he has a following is that the Republican establishment was not delivering. And of course, in 16, the Democrats delivered the establishment candidate. That's the only reason the guy's there. And so I'm saying if you're a Republican candidate and you're qualified for your office, I think you should make your case about why you're qualified. But it would be insanity to try to play it to get Donald Trump's endorsement. It makes zero sense. And by the way, think if all the Republican candidates did that, Trump would have zero. Whoops, can I do that? He would have. I didn't mean it. That was a zero. All right. I
So it appears that
I would
Christie's
say that. Let me try that again in case you want to take it out.
Sure.
If the majority of Republican candidates would just take that tack, not kissing his ring or other things, then Donald Trump would have zero impact on the election. Okay, he's a footnote to history. Let's
So
leave him there.
you would say that they could disregard his base because there's a whole bunch of people out there that will do whatever Trump tells them. Doesn't matter what the candidates are saying. They'll just, I'm a Trump guy.
But let me make this observation. Trump would be president today if he expanded his base. All right, he had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to act like a competent executive, or at least a reasonable human being, at least somebody that's a public servant versus playing for himself. He had chances over and over again. It'd be insane to expect him to behave himself. Because think if you're a candidate for, I don't care, governor, president of the United States, senator, it doesn't matter, and you go get his endorsement. Number one, you've just handed the other side a great attack surface, which is, fairly effective. Hey, that's just the next Trump. You don't want more Trump, there. And also, at any second, on a whim, he could pull the support, and now you've got nothing. You've got worse than nothing. So I would encourage Republicans have some backbone for once, and just try to govern. Anyway.
Yeah,
That's
no,
my cut on.
it appears that's what it appears Christie is doing right now. I know he's got a book coming out, but he has hit the interview trails this week, and he seems to be the first one to separate himself from Trump, or try to. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
right?
Well, I mean, Chris Christie's a political animal. He has had his own issues. I don't think he's viable as a national candidate, but who knows? I mean, again, I think I've said everything I need to say about Trump and the Republican
Sure.
as a Republican base.
Michelle from Arlington writes, do you think, and this is kind of an interesting, she puts a note in that you seem to be, you'll love this, a great finance guy. She wants to know do you think there's a relationship between inflation and the supply chain? And she says, is this a different inflation than what you've seen over the years?
Okay, so first of all, I have had some experience, and I've had a long business career, and I've seen a lot. Um, but I'd also encourage everybody to, read good economic reports, study the data, and actually you can watch the finance channels. There's a lot of entertainment on there, and they wrap in some politics, but ultimately it has to come down to numbers. And so I think this is a different inflation than what we've seen in the past because it is a liquidity fueled inflation coupled with an absolute train wreck in the supply chain, no pun intended, by the way, on the train wreck. If you remember, early on in the pandemic, one of the first guests we went out and got was Bill Michaels, who is a worldwide respected expert on supply chain. And the theory was, hey, something bad's going to happen. You can't take all these trucks off the road and not let people go into warehouses to work and uh, put ships into dock without there being issues downstream. So look where we're at today. We can't get goods to market. All right, that's a fact. If there was 60 Minutes actually did a pretty nice piece on trying to call out some of the piece parts in the supply chain. So that means now that all this liquidity that's out there, those dollars are chasing the remaining available goods. So if everybody remembers their Econ 101 class, the definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. Okay, so what happens in classic economics? Well, the price gets raised, so the value of all that extra stimulus starts to come down. And then what happens? Eventually, people go, you know what? If it's a non-essential purchase, all right, I'm out. I'm not going to buy. Now demand sinks. Now prices sink, and now we'll have the opposite challenge of deflation. So, I mean, we're in for a very, very wild ride here. I'd also encourage people to keep an eye on what individual companies are doing. Are they adding staff? Or are they cutting staff? Three great examples this past week where GE, Toshiba, and Johnson & Johnson effectively broke themselves up. If you remember the 80s and the corporate raiders, that the raiders decided that these businesses were worth a lot more in pieces than they were together. And so if you think about what those three companies, GE, Toshiba, and J&J have done, they're getting ahead of the curve. We're going to get broken up by somebody. Let's do it to ourselves and have individual businesses. So we're in for a very challenging economy. I would encourage people, if you have a job, keep it. Live below your means, and be alert. It's going to be a wild ride coming up. And if just one cap on this, in the event that the supply chain disruption prices people out of the market and demand drops, the tool of cutting interest rates is gone.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and the tool of raising interest rates to halt the inflation is not going to have the same effect that it had back in the 80s.
Rich, and this one's from me. When do you think this starts affecting the S&P? Because it seems that hasn't taken a dive yet. Is that a lagging indicator, or is it? When does that happen? If this is all coming to bear?
Well, economic history has piles of people on the dust heap that try to predict the movements of the stock market. Okay, so there's no such thing as a successful market timer. Maybe you get lucky here, you get lucky there,
Okay.
but right now, the stock market's very frothy. The multiple, I think, is trading at a 25x versus a historical 17x, and it's not sustainable. It's kind of a game of chicken right now, or greater fool theory. And it's stock markets. A lot of I don't want to say lemming-like behavior, but more like sheep-like behavior. Nobody wants to be the last person out of a declining market. I think we're going to get some wild corrections. Um, my advice would be talk to your financial advisor, stay diversified, and try to stay in solid investments that you understand.
Cool. Um, so today is November the 17th. The Kyle Rittenhouse jury is still in deliberations as we speak. And the reason I say that is because by the time you and I air this, things will probably be different. What are your thoughts on how that went for the defense? I mean, you had a great guest last week in attorney Wolfgang Mueller. But what are your thoughts since then about what you've seen and just your gut reaction?
Well, in terms of how the trial is going to turn out, I think it could go either way. Um, and I did watch a good portion of the testimony and saw a lot of the video. And of course, Wolfgang Mueller was very instructive. And you look at this, but here's the sad part of this. Well, there's a lot of things to be sad about. Obviously, loss of life, destruction of a city, a young man in the crosshairs for the rest of his life. But the country again polarized. You have people cheering today because their tribe, and I use that term uh, very purposely. They don't care really about anything else other than their side winning. Okay, defeat the other. Um, there are members of certain tribes, they want young Rittenhouse put away for life. There are other tribes that want him to walk free, and in fact, may even elevate him to a hero type status. And there are politicians and so-called reporting organizations on both sides of that divide championing that and brazenly leaving out key facts in reporting, all right, in order to inflame or persuade that side. And so I'm listening, like, what's not there? No one is saying, I just want to see justice served. And that's where I come down is I don't know the law, and only the jury heard all of the testimony, saw all the evidence, watched all the video, heard all the persuasion, and had the instructions in the law from the judge. We need to trust the jury to render a verdict, or in this case, I guess, multiple verdicts, and accept the outcome. The notion that we're going to threaten jurors, the notion that somehow it was rigged one way or the other. Nobody has a complete set of information other than the jurors. And I would say, let's hope for justice here and give those people that are in a very difficult position our support and their opportunity to do what all citizens should be willing to do. And that's, to be a jury of the peers, and let's hope for justice, and let's accept the outcome.
So Diane from Carthage, and it just says Carthage here. There's a lot of different Carthages. Anyway, she's talking about service, and she wants to know if you think that even being on city council, being on a school board, being on a jury, we just kind of led into that, is now fraught with danger because of threats, and especially with juries and judges now. Well, they get paid, but just simple things like I want to be on my school board, or I want to be on city council. Is it worth it anymore? Is it worth it? And if it's not worth it, does that then get extremism on those boards because they're the ones that are going to scream the hardest? And that's from Diane in Carthage.
I think that public service is a solemn duty, whether it's a jury, it's a school board, it's a PTA, it's a make your neighborhood beautiful. that's really what makes a city, a state, a nation, is that sum total of participation by actual citizens. Um, when there's agenda driven policies that don't fit what people understand the facts to be, that's when people are going to be very upset. Now, I think it's uh, not borne out that we need to call people that get angry in school board meetings terrorists. I've been in plenty of school board meetings where uh, people get very emotional. It's about your kids, it's about your community, and they simply want answers. And the times it gets most testy is when people feel like the resources of the school system in this case, or in these cases, are being diverted to something other than the education of children, or people are using it to drive an agenda. Um, you know, I, I I think people should continue to serve. I think they should continue to be supportive. But remember that the school board, the PTA, they serve at the pleasure of their constituencies. And again, most people just want to get their kids educated in the best way so they can have reading comprehension, do computation, and be able to communicate and have familiarity with the um, technologies of the day. Now, they also have to have a sense of history and a sense of who the country is. And this is where we have the most controversy. That history is always being examined. There's always different angles. Um, take for example the Kennedy assassination. Right? People are still writing about what really happened and what did Jim Garrison do and so forth. Just kind of as a sidebar, think if the Kennedy assassination had happened today, we had
Oh
this
man,
one little piece of 8 millimeter film, right?
there'd
Think
be
of
a
how
thousands
many
of
cell
Blu-rays.
phones would have been out there.
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Yeah, it would have been. Um, but anyway, history is always being examined, and I think we should continue to examine our history, and we should face up to things we've done well, things we haven't done well, and try to move forward. To me, the key to move forward, though, is not you did X to my ancestors, so now we're going to do this to your uh, heirs. That's insane. It's okay, how do we move forward together? We're all here together at this point. What should we be doing? And
Hmm.
I don't want to jump off into some of these extreme cases, but if my daughter or granddaughter was assaulted by anybody and the school board didn't acknowledge it, yeah, they'd have a problem with me. And that's not right wing, that's not left wing, that's not partisan. That is your job as a school board is to make sure that the children have a safe place to go to school, period.
Right. There's a thought out there though, and let's move away from school boards because she's asking out a lot of different, just service in general. But there's a thought out there that smart community people, um, and good-minded, successful business people could be that. Could be good home keepers, who you would want to have on these decision-making councils, whether it's city council or PTA or school board, are going to shy away from serving, and in that vacuum will be the people who scream the loudest. And that could go right or left. I think that's nonpartisan.
Well, here's what I would say, Brian, to that is remember that if it's not in your community, the filter that you're getting is coming from a reporting organization that is designed to inflame you, is designed to feed your partisanship one way or the other. All
Yeah.
right. So it's really hard to render judgment on a distant school board in a distant state someplace. Um,
Right. Well, this is a nice feed in, Rich. Last week or 2 weeks ago, when the infrastructure bill was passed, the one that was bipartisan passed, in that there were 18 Republicans that signed on to that. The I think it was Upton from Michigan released phone messages that he had received from people who were going to kill his family, make sure that their families were killed, because as a Republican, he gave Biden a win. It wasn't about the policy, because it was just it. He gave Biden a win before a Republican could get that win. That's kind of it's a little bit of an extension of what we're talking about. At what point do you go too far with that kind of stuff?
Well,
I know the guy was probably upset, but
well, well,
man,
for, well,
if you heard
well,
those recordings, they were nuts.
yeah. Well, first of all, I mean that's obviously too far, and thankfully, with the technologies we have today, the person can probably be apprehended.
I hope so.
Although I would imagine most public figures get nutcases writing and calling them all the time, and they do
Hmm.
get threats. And you know, I don't want to say shouldn't be, the barking dogs don't bite. Um, but that's the one that got chose. We're gonna go publicize that one. It's a tragedy that we get any of them, but I don't think that really sets the tone. I think the bigger issue is um, it's indisputable that we need roads, we need bridges, we need ports. Okay, come on. I mean, everybody can see what's going on in Long Beach, Los Angeles, San Pedro. We can't get the ships into port because our docking facilities are so old. And and if you look at the terminology in the reporting, it was Republican defectors. It's like, what? I mean,
Yeah.
who are they defecting from? It's and the notion that, oh, we don't want to give Biden a win. It's like, what? It's so I kind of say, okay, if Biden gets a win, who got the loss, right? And
Yeah.
hey, that's a Republican bridge or a Democrat bridge. I mean, no, we're all going to drive over the bridge, for Pete's sake. And so this hyper partisan about opposing a president on the same bill that you would have championed had that person been a member of your party. And by the way, the reverse of that's true. Um, shows how broken our system is, because it's not about my tribe winning, your tribe winning, or your favorite reporter makes you feel good because they affirm you. It's we're supposed to be working together on things that are common, like a common bridge. I was just thought I
Yeah.
would try that play on words there.
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're the professional comic. You do the jokes.
Okay, so this one's from our home state. This is Tim from Sault Ste. Marie. Wants to know that with supply chain troubles we're having, do you think that this will spur more manufacturing in the United States that has been since been pushed overseas? He wants to know if it'll come back. That's interesting, coming from the mining. Well, Sault Ste. Marie is not so much mining, but Upper Peninsula. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, they're not far from the iron mines in Hibbing and Eveleth, Minnesota,
Yeah.
where their locals up there want to reopen the mines.
Yeah. I think
So
the White Pine Mine way up in the Keweenaw Peninsula may open as well.
yeah, so I think the country would be far better off if we used more of our own resources and built more of our own products. I think people can see that today. There is going to be an international trading system, of course, but we were doing pretty well pre-pandemic about reshoring jobs and reshoring manufacturing, and that seems to have gone by the wayside. I don't hear it talked about much as a priority, and it's an uphill battle to start a business these days. And if you do start one, can you get supply and can you get labor? Um,
Yeah, labor would be the big one, I
yeah.
would think.
Well,
Yeah.
labor. Look, there's a clearing price for everything, and when the wages are such that it makes sense to get back to work, people will get back to work. They pre-pandemic, as wages were rising, the more and more people came into the workforce because they felt it was worth it. And that's just basic economics.
In about the third or fourth episode of your show, and we're going back a couple of years now, and this was eye opening for me. Again, you live in a different world than I do as far as having a business background goes. But you said we're talking about minimum wage. At that point, the argument was $15 an hour, which everybody went, "Oh my gosh!" You said that number is more like $26 an
Yeah,
hour if you want to make
22,
it,
21. Yep.
buy a home and things like that. I was shocked at that number, and now I'm looking at signing bonuses of $3,000, hourly wages of $17 to $21 an hour. We're getting right into your wheelhouse there. Well done. First of all, I didn't see that. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? You
Yeah,
seem to
I
be
mean,
heading in that right direction.
look, it's arithmetic, and yeah, I had large payrolls, and there's a to obtain top talent and to retain that top talent, there's a cost of doing that, and people have to feel like they're advancing economically. And as I've said often, if somebody decides to live in a tent or in a van or in an RV, it's not necessarily an irrational decision. With the median price of a home in Los Angeles County, I don't hold me to this, but I think it's around $700,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so now you got to come up post Great Recession. You've got to come up with 20% down payment, and then you've got to make those payments, and you've got to do it in the tax climate that California has. We've wages are part of it. Purchasing power is the other part of it. And that can only be achieved through good tax policy, and it can only be achieved through uh, good businesses producing good wages. And part of my experience was the 1960s, 1970s automotive, where U.S. car makers were king, and those were great middle class lives just for being part of Ford, General Motors, or Chrysler Corporation, and American Motors even until they
Yeah.
folded in. Um, Today, when you look at the biggest companies in the world, what kind of jobs are being created that make middle class standard of living for Amazon workers or Facebook or Google and so forth? And we've all heard the stories about the Google employees that can't afford to live in the communities that they go to work in. So we have work to do on the wage front. We have work to do on the spending power, and there's a role in there for government. And I wish they would get going on the antitrust measures that the big players definitely need applied to them. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, certainly Facebook, Twitter. These are platforms that have tremendous amount of control and a tremendous amount of information, and they are subject to being controlled. They need to be broken into multiple companies. Period. And I don't know. Would
Early in
that be a
your
win
business.
for Biden or Republicans?
Yeah.
Get off your butt
Ear-
and support this. And
yeah.
and look. You asked about wins for presidents. If you go back to 1994, Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich collaborated on the 10 items in the contract with America. Clinton was a smart politician, figured out which way the political winds were blowing, and decided to work with Newt Gingrich. And Newt Gingrich did care that he gave a quote win to President Clinton. They got work done. Okay, now you can
Yeah.
have your views on whether it was good policy or not, but they were doing what government's supposed to do. And now here we are, not that many years later, we finally, at long last, get an infrastructure bill through, and people are going, well, that was horrible because it was a win for Biden. Just shut up. All but you 18 Republicans, there's a saying, STFU, okay, figure it out.
All right, so I'm going to pull a club out of your golf bag to finish this up. Is there anything that we didn't talk
Ah,
about today that you think we should have?
well, you know something, Brian. I look at big items, right? And one of the things I think that's a real threat to the republic and a threat to people's peace of mind is to be constantly evaluated by their ancestral heritage. All right, that you check the box. I am by according to 23andMe, I'm an indigenous person, and those are facts. If you follow University of Maryland, just said, well, they're going to have admission policies to promote people of color, but Asians, you don't count. We're making you white. I'm going, well, okay, that's an interesting cut on that, because I'm thinking, all right, what minority group, in this century were interred in caps? That would have been the Japanese, right?
Right,
And all, remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the anti-Asian attacks, right? But now, hey,
Yeah.
you know what? Your grade points are too good, so yeah, you're not going to be a minority anymore. Yet, at the same time, the mayor of Boston, Ms. Wu, is heralded as the first person of color, first woman of color to be the mayor of Boston. Now, if she had applied to Harvard or the University of Maryland, she's not, but as mayor, she is. Like, can we all just be human beings for a bit? And
all right.
I could do this all day long, Brian. I mean, this is where we have to get off this notion of you are what your ancestral heritage is. Okay, I think it's really interesting. I think it makes us a great country. What little I understand about genetics, strong traits come out. You get beautiful people because of our mixing and such. And I think it's a false dichotomy that we're being driven into: team red, team blue, and listen to this, listen to that. Epithets are, they listen to that news. Okay, but it's the only way to get the whole picture is you got to listen to both of them. And P.S. do it before 7 o'clock at night, because it gets crazy after that. It's all entertainment at that point.
All right.
I'm sorry, what was the question? Was there anything else we need to talk about? I just want to thank my listeners and viewers. Thank you for indulging me this solo shot. We are going to have guests coming up to talk about the media model of the country today. We're going to talk about the mental health crisis. We're going to talk more about COVID and vaccines and all the unknowns and new things that we're discovering and treatments. And again, that's another thing that's been weirdly divided over political lines. Okay, it's a new, a neo virus, right? A coronavirus. It's new, and treatments are new, and we're discovering what works, what doesn't work, and we're gathering that information. But we have people that want to shut out things that don't fit their narrative. It's okay to say, you know what, we did the best we could based on the information we had at the time. Turned out not to be the case. Okay, this is not that hard.
All right. Well, thanks for sitting down. I know you're busy. We'll do this again soon. We should do this more often. The mailbag is great. That's
I appreciate people communicating, and I want to see the question. I know I don't want to see the questions in advance. So
no, you don't want to see them in advance. All right, Rich. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.
Mighty fine. Thanks, Brian. So long.
Thanks for joining us on The Common Bridge. Remember to rate us, review us, and comment about what you heard today, and recommend us to your friends. Visit us at richardhelppie.com and sign up for special promotions. This broadcast was produced by Stunt 3 Multimedia and is available on YouTube and all podcast directories. All rights are reserved by Richard Helppie.